Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another Behind the Curtin podcast on the Nittany Sports Now Network. My name is Jarrod Prugar, and I'm joined by my good friend, the mayor, Murph.
Good
Chaos
evening, Jarrod.
is, right? Good evening from beautiful Arizona, where the beloved Sun Devils of the region are playing in the Big 12 championship game, which we'll talk a little bit about later in the show. But chaos is the only way to describe this college football season. Every corner, it's been something so crazy out of control that you just never know what's going to happen. And then everything seemed to fall into place last week. You have Ryan Day coaching against Michigan, which is the same way that James Franklin coaches against Penn State. And then, of course, in true fashion, Ryan Day loses to Michigan. Chaos ensues on the field because nobody can control their own players, because why not? And Penn State, with a win over Maryland, sees themselves right into the Big Ten championship game. What are your thoughts on all of that part of the chaos?
I can honestly say I did not expect to happen what we saw happen. First of all, in the Michigan-Ohio State game, Michigan's had a down year, and yes, it's a rivalry. We know that is the game. It is absolutely the game. But it goes back even further, Jared. When you look back at the Ohio State game when they played Penn State, like Penn State just had an absolute darling of a chance to win that game, and they should have won that game. But we all know what happened. We all seen what happened. If you take the coaching in that game versus the coaching that we've seen the last few weeks from the staff, it's night and day, and not Ryan Day either. I mean, expectations. So as soon as that happened, it was kind of reminiscent a little bit when in 2016, when we were actually at not 2016, yeah, 2016, when we needed Ohio State to win or Michigan to win again, I believe, in order to get in. They were playing Michigan State that last game, and it was like deja vu all over again, like Yogi Berra would say. And the expectation was not there, and that just flipped a switch. What happened? Penn State came out with a usual slow start, but then it all came together, and like you said, we'll touch on that later about in a review of the game. But yeah, chaos started there, and the chaos did not end the rest of the night because the event of the day was plant your flag.
That's right. Everybody loves to plant their flag, and almost every situation outside of Texas A&M ended terribly for everybody involved. And I love rivalries. I think they are a beautiful thing. It's weird because Penn State is very clearly unrivaled, according to James Franklin. But the biggest thing for me is beat them. If you don't beat them, they're going to plant their flag. They just owned you, and especially in Columbus, where Ryan Day has become just a puppet for the Wolverines. You can't even use the excuse that Connor Stallions was on the sidelines. Now, do I think he's still probably helping their program? 100%, because they're that arrogant. But for them, just go do your job and beat them. For them to lose by 3 points as a 2-touchdown favorite at home is insane. I know that people in Columbus are they want to burn him at the stake, and deservedly so. But there are 37 million reasons why in a college football world that is full of chaos and unknowns why they're not going to fire Ryan Day, at least right now.
Right. Jarrod, you brought up a point there about losing at home as a 2-touchdown favorite to Michigan. And where did they drop in the poll?
Four spots.
You're losing to an unranked team at home in which you were more than a 2-touchdown favorite. Now, I want to put that shoe on the other foot. Let's say, for all intents and purposes, Maryland was 6-5, just like Michigan was going into that game. And Penn State loses to Maryland in that game. Do you think for 1 minute they're going to drop 4 spots? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. So the chaos started with the upset of the day with Michigan, beating Ohio State. The chaos
And we're
involved.
forgetting that 25 overtime game, 8 overtime game between
Oh,
Georgia and Georgia Tech.
yeah, on Friday. But um, like, so the chaos continued right through the weekend into yesterday. And as we've been debating this, Jarrod, you and I. I actually had my cousin actually call me, who lives down in southeastern Pennsylvania, on Saturday. He called me when the game wasn't even over yet with Penn State, and he was with a bunch of his buddies for Thanksgiving, and got together to watch the game. And he's like, "I need your help on this. Like, what's going to happen if Penn State loses in the championship game? They're not going to fall out of the playoffs." I said, "No, they're not going to fall out of the playoffs. Will they still host the game? I would think so." So before we got into that last weekend, the general consensus of the committee was, we're not going to hold that against you if you lose a playoff. Now, all of a sudden, chaos is about to start all over again after this coming weekend's games, depending on how they fold out, because now the consensus is like, well, we got to look at each game and see how that's going to happen. So I get it. We're in unprecedented territory here coming into this playoff season with the advent of the 12. But what's going to happen is you're going to benefit a team like South Bend Community College, who doesn't too good to get into a playoff because, hey, we're the Crying Irish. And now they're going to be the beneficiary of a team losing if they can jump. I call BS. And if that happens, I would think that now teams are like, then why have a conference championship if this is how
Right,
you're
100%.
going to do this?
Yep, 100%. And I think the way that you look at the conference championship games now, A, number one, why have them? And B, now you're looking at less time to prepare, right? So like if you're Notre Dame or Ohio State and you're not playing the conference championship game, regardless of whether you play in a conference or not, you have 2 weeks going into that first round playoff game. Whereas players in that, and if you win, obviously you get that 2 week bye, right? You get the 2 weeks off, which I don't necessarily think is great. I like being able to take a week off and play. I think that's
Mhm.
fine. But again, like to me, you can't punish a team for getting there and then losing. And I think that Penn State will be okay if they lose. I think they end up being fifth. Now, what they didn't say was that those teams would. They didn't say that or I guess they did say that the teams wouldn't move up. The teams that aren't playing, the Miamis of the world, LOL. That is hilarious to me. I've been wanting them to lose for so many weeks, and they finally did it twice in 3 weeks, and then they wonder why they don't. They're not in the playoff.
Mhm.
Of course, 3 loss Bama is, and that makes it even funnier. But that's just SEC having more things to do with money and money talks. But if Penn State loses, they're 5. If Georgia loses, they stay, I think, at 7 where they're at. Notre Dame, 6th. Then you've got Ohio State at 8, Tennessee at 9, Indiana is at 10. Everybody's beloved Alabama Roll Tide, Crimson Tide, whatever, Cousins, are at 11. And then 12 is the Big 12 championship. And now, of course, you can get chaos, and it could be crazy if Clemson beats SMU, if UNLV beats Boise State, then the Big 10 or then the Big 12 gets an automatic bye, and that is absurd too.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and I think it's so hard to punish a team like a Penn State, and this is not just speaking because I cover Penn State, but to go to the Big 10 championship, it's an extra game and play the number one team in the country. They're expected to lose. They are the underdog. So I think that's why they'll come in at fifth, and yeah, everybody else. I think the way that it looks is if the status quo happens, where if Penn State loses, they're 5. SMU wins, they're the ACC champion. And then so on and so forth.
It's funny because when the college football rankings came out here, 4 weeks ago, every single week since that time, and it's not just been a slight shift, it's been not quite monumental, but there's been a lot of shuffling every week. Like, all these teams are losing, other teams, it's just been a lot. And that is great. That is great for the sport. It draws interest. But this year is going to be a guinea pig type of year where the committee is going to have to look at how they handle situations. Obviously, when it comes out here on what Sunday is the seating show, I believe.
Yes, Sunday is the selection show. Yeah.
Yeah, the selection show. But that's going to be interesting. So when you said about Penn State losing, I feel the same way you do. If Penn State plays a respectable game, if they keep it within a 10 to 13 point, if they lose, I say if they lose, if they keep it respectable. However, Penn State can go out here and do the funniest thing and win. Like, if they can win, beat Oregon, they very well, I'm saying, should they or could they? Not 100% sure yet how I feel. They could vault into the number one spot, get that bye, and Mr. Prugar, where does the Big Ten champion usually play?
Fiesta Bowl.
No, the Rose Bowl.
No, the Rose Bowl, yeah.
So now, all of a sudden, I'm a 5-hour drive away. So I'm like, okay, a few years ago, I did not go to the Utah Penn State game, but I can guarantee you, wedding or not coming up in May, I am going to that game. But I want to, before you go to our first break here, I just want to kind of go out here a little bit. You know, we're talking about coaches of the year. Some of these teams this year that have risen from the ashes. Obviously, SMU with the first season in the ACC. You got even Colorado. Sure, they've turned it around, but you know, we all know the territory that comes with that, the glitz, the glamour. Obviously, you're going to go to Cignetti at Indiana. So he went from 3-9 last year. They fired Tom Allen. Tom Allen comes to Penn State. Indiana goes 11-1. Gets absolutely clobbered by Ohio State. All right, but they win 11-1 from 3-9. Nobody expected that. Now, where I want to go out on here is you got Kenny Dillingham out here at ASU. I mean, it's the talk of the town right now with ASU. ASU and it was picked to finish 16th in their conference, dead last. And here they are now in the Big Ten
in a brand new conference, no less.
Yes, in the Big 12, they're in the championship game now, coming up this Saturday with Iowa State. So, yeah, they have a chance to do the funniest thing. But now, some of my friends, as I mentioned last week, are like, you're going to find this funny, Jarrod, because she texted me the other day and she said, if Penn State plays ASU, we definitely have to watch that game together. I don't think she's ever been around me while I'm watching the Penn State game, and I probably might not get invited back if that happens. So that's all I'm going to say. That's all I'm going to say about that. But yeah, ASU, Dillingham, he got his boys ready. They flipped it around, and I do kind of want to touch on them a little bit because it's, you know, it is the area here where I'm at, and it's just it's another story. It's a good story. So yeah, it's going to be, like you said, it's going to be chaos again.
Yeah, and it starts Friday, it goes into Saturday, and there's just so many things that can happen. Penn State has a really good track to make the playoff, obviously, number one, but go deep in the playoff. And that's, you know, in my last bowl projection that came out on Wednesday, I have them winning or going, not winning, but going to the national championship game. That path is there. If they're
the 5
seed,
yes,
the 5 seed is the bread and butter, because if you get the 5 seed, which is a really weird spot to be in, right? Because you want to win, the competitor in you wants to win, but if you're the 1 seed, then it's not all that great. But the 5 seed, you get the 12 seed, then you get to face Boise State or that last number 4 seed,
right.
And then you win that game, and you're in the national semifinal. And that's a game that could come against an Oregon, most likely. Get a rematch there. It's tough to beat a team twice. But there's just so much that can happen, and they could be anywhere, I think, between 1 and 2 or 5 and 6, depending on the outcome of those other games that will be decided well before that kicks off at 8:17 p.m. in Indianapolis, Indiana on Saturday night.
Absolutely. My son actually asked me, he lives right outside of Indianapolis in Lebanon. and he's actually going to the game Saturday. He got tickets for like $31 a piece. Like all the Ohio State people are bailing because they all, hey, we're going
It's
to
the
the
exact same
championship.
thing happened in
Yes,
2016.
yes, exactly.
And we're going to go to our first break, but I want to touch a little bit more on that when we come back for the Behind the Curtain podcast on the Nittany Sports Now Network. Welcome back to the Behind the Curtain podcast on the Sports Now Network. He is the mayor, and I am just one of his minions, Jarrod. And you mentioned the get-in price for the Big Ten championship game. And we've talked about the college football playoff, and we're going to talk about, and this is going to lead right into our Oregon preview. But the get-in price for the Big Ten championship game from central Pennsylvania, it's about a 7-hour trip to Indianapolis, which is not bad. 7 hours is drivable. For those of you in the Midwest, it's a lot more simpler. And once you get to Ohio, you just put it in straight and you get there, and it's great. There's no hills, there are no curves, there's nothing. Absolutely nothing. It's just the most solemn drive ever. But now you have the conference championship game, and then you've got potentially a first-round home game. Then potentially the bowl game is for the national quarterfinals, and then another bowl game for national semifinals, and then you get to the national championship. You go from having conference championship game to bowl game. Now you have 4 options postseason. That's a lot for any individual for travel, for money, for tickets, for everything. And that's not an easy situation for even the most avid of Penn State fans.
Yeah, that's one of the things we were talking about, even with my boys and stuff, in the last couple of days when Sean told me that, tickets were like $31. You see tickets now in the upper deck going for $18, $21. And that's great for those of us who grew up with Penn State football. Like myself, we had season tickets there for the last 5 years or so. Once Ryan had graduated, and even when he was at Penn State, and you're so used to sitting up high. So when you get up high in like a stadium that seats 67,000 people, just like going to the Cardinals games here, like when I go, or the Fiesta Bowl, which we have gone to many times. We've seen Clemson, Ohio State, we saw Penn State and Washington. It's not that bad because they're so used to Beaver Stadium being so vast. So I absolutely have no problem. Hey man, $20-$30. The problem is now, like, to fly there on short notice, it's so expensive. So that kind of negates the cost of the ticket because of the cost of the flight. It's like a 17-hour drive from here. Yeah, that's not happening. But then my son says, "So what happens if Penn State makes it to the national championship game?" And he was already looking at tickets, like $1,200. So I sat there and I thought about this, Jarrod, and I'm thinking, okay, so it would be a great opportunity to go to the game with my son, but in the same hand, it's like the last time Penn State won the national champion was 1986. I was a senior in high school. Yes, you weren't even born yet. You were a figment of the imagination. But when I put things into perspective like that, if I don't go and you add another 36 years, I'll be 95 years old. I'll be like Tom Stock going to the game. So it's an opportunity that I think as we get older, I know guys your age and stuff, you don't see it that way as much right now because you're young.
Well, no, I think that makes perfect sense because you look at, like, for me and the Pirates right now. Obviously, it's different because I'm in the media and I cover the Pirates, but the Pirates, we spent all those years. I don't remember when they were in the playoffs before, but that 2012, 2013, 2014 run, 2013 was well worth it. That wild card game is something I'll never forget. Now it's all about those experiences, and you're absolutely right. The price. I'd like to try to advance plan as much as I can because Saturday is Ohio State's losing. I'm texting my wife saying, "Hey, we're probably going to Ohio." And for me, I run 2 youth basketball leagues that are Saturday and Sunday first weeks. I'm like, text my boss, "Hey, I gotta go to the game, like, for my other job. Like, I'm being sent to, Indianapolis." Again, it's another Big Ten championship. You don't know when it's gonna happen next.
Hmm.
Obviously, they're fortunate, 2016 to
Hmm.
2024. So yeah, you have to take advantage of the experiences, but those experiences now are either A, going to be closer together or more spread out. But if they're closer together, that racks up the cost now because if you go to the home game, it's about 150 bucks. If and that's not the secondary market. You go to the quarterfinal game, which is a bowl game. That's going to be expensive. The flights, it's so hard to you have to kind of advance plan
Well, it's
these
this time of
flights.
the year too, because of the holiday
Right.
season
It's
and the short
holidays. Yeah.
notice. Yeah.
And these bowl games from Pennsylvania aren't easy trips. You go to the Peach Bowl. That's probably the easiest one um, to go to Atlanta. Then you've got the Orange Bowl. You've got the Fiesta Bowl, which is not easy to get to. The Cotton Bowl is not easy. The Rose Bowl is not
Fiesta
easy.
Bowl's 20 minutes from my house. What are you talking about?
Yeah, well, you're not in central Pennsylvania. You're the mayor virtually of Altoona, but you're not here. And so when you look at it that way, you're really starting to rack up the cost, which leads us back to the logistics of Oregon coming to the Big Ten championship game in Indiana. Indiana, they're traveling 3 time zones to play at Lucas Oil Stadium. Penn State's traveling 7 hours by car, less than probably 2 hours by plane, and
Mhm.
that is huge for them. And that is an advantage for Penn State automatically. But the logistics of it just make things really hard right now to kind of predict what's going to happen next. That home game would be perfect for Pennsylvania, or for Pennsylvania, for Penn State too. You get to host that home game. Hopefully, it's a night game because that would just be absolutely magical to have a home game at Beaver Stadium if they were to lose. But if they were to win, well, then now you're going to potentially Pasadena, or you're going to the Fiesta Bowl or the Sugar Bowl or wherever. And that's a crazy, crazy thing to try to balance while the holidays are still going on.
Right. And so the after the conference championships this week, we have a 2 week break. So those first round of games are the 20th or the 21st, if I'm not mistaken, for the first round games. So you got to look at a Penn State situation there where absolutely a night game at Beaver Stadium towards the end of December, 18, 20 degrees, 10-degree wind chill, maybe some snow mixed in there a little bit. And what about the students? So this is the question I have, because you know how much the students bring to the table here. I would expect that that Friday would be their last day, and then they'd be on Christmas break until like the second week of January. So I'm wondering how much that's going to play, that these kids are going to stick around or what have you. So it's an interesting concept. It's a think about, to see how much, because that is a very effective tool for Penn State. That's what they pride themselves on, and the students are a huge part of that at
Yes.
at the game. So it's just logistics is exactly what you're saying. Like the whole thing. It's just it all comes down to cost. And like you said, what do you pick and choose? Do we wait to see if they make it to the national championship game? Do we wait and say the semifinal? For me, Jarrod, I mean, obviously the semifinals are, I believe, is it Dallas? Is it the Sugar or the Cotton Bowl and the Peach Bowl this year, or the semifinals?
Yeah, I believe so.
I thought so. So the Fiesta Bowl here is going to be a quarterfinal game. Don't know who's going to be here. The Rose Bowl is as well. So yeah, it's just interesting. I'm fortunate that I'm within 25 minutes of one venue and 5 hours from another. And so, in the future, it's great. Hopefully, Penn State gets out this way, gets closer. Uh, but yeah, I mean, all things considered, they did go this week. They took care of business with Maryland. Um, another slow start, and there's a couple things I want to touch on that whenever we start discussing the game. Uh, there's really not a whole lot to touch on, other than they went out a morbidly slow start, put 4 touchdowns on the board in the second quarter, one going away. threw a touchdown pass on the last play of the game. But I will say this: James Franklin had the absolute most perfect explanation I think he could have come up with when he answered that question, and he was pretty animated about it too. Well, rightfully so, because obviously we all saw the exchange at the end of the game between him and Loxley. Um, but 45, 3-3 still remains. I mean, they are little brother to Penn State, just like Pitt is, and it is just. But the one thing I did want to touch on there, Jarrod, was, and you may know this more than me. So as we know, Tyler Warren is just a bucket full of yards away from having 1,000. He's only 5 yards away from setting the record for the Big Ten tight ends in the season. Do those stats count moving forward with the Big Ten championship game?
I think for career, yes. For season, no. For the conference championship game, but I think the bowl game would count.
Okay, because I'm curious as to why if he was that close, and they had plenty of opportunities, that they wouldn't at least get him that. I'm not saying Tyler Warren is a me first guy, because that's not what I'm going
He's
at. But
not. Yeah, right. 100%.
you got a guy that close. Get him. Give him his due. He's carried you all season long. At least reward him. And I was just sitting there like, what are you doing? Like, give him the ball. Like, he can do this with the one reception, and it never happened. I don't think he received a target from the third, like that first catch in the third quarter, the rest of the game.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really weird, right? But what Franklin said is great. And I think that's one of those situations where, for them, it's just going to be one of those situations where, listen, you need style points. That matters. Those things all matter now. And let's be real, there's no love lost between Maryland and Franklin. Not at all. And when you have that type of relationship there, and with some of the stuff that's happened off the field, with what things have been said in this coaching circles, and yeah, you're absolutely going to destroy them. And you know what? Don't have your starters in late in the game. It's that simple.
Right, right, and that's the thing that caught my attention. Franklin's like, "Hey, I got my threes and fours in here, and you got your ones in, and you're still trying to score. Well, you know what? So are we with our threes and fours, not with our ones." And I think that's all the difference in the world. I think really, if he would have had his second or third team in, third stringers in, it might have been different. It may have. I
Oh,
can't answer that,
without a doubt.
you know, but because he did decide to keep his ones in, that changed the whole perspective of the game. So anyway, not really too much to talk about there with Maryland, but a lot to talk about coming up with Oregon.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. The way that James Franklin, you and I have talked about this quite a few times. The way that James Franklin is coaching right now is spectacular. He's being aggressive when he needs to be aggressive. He's taking all the right risks, and they're paying off for him in a big way. And I think, the way that he coached, the aggressiveness that he coached with, the passion he coached with on Saturday. That's not saying that he's not passionate. I'm not trying to say that at all, but it seems to have been ramped up a little. Excuse me, and it's impressive
He's
what he
chippy.
said in the. Yeah,
Yeah,
he's
he's
playing with a
chippy.
chip, coaching with a chip on his shoulder. And listen, Penn State has been slighted nearly all year. What have they done? Who have they beat? What have they? They're not as good as what they think. Saturday is a perfect opportunity to go out and prove that Penn
Hmm.
State not only can do it, but that they belong. And I think I have them winning 24-20. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. But Penn State has a perfect chance to go to Indianapolis and show the world that they are a good football team. That their consistency throughout the year that has got them to this point is for a reason.
Yeah, I'm looking at this game, and if you just look at the game on paper straight, you're like, wow, like Oregon's got all the tools. Um, they had 10 sacks last week in their game, their defense. Um, Penn State's offense, their offensive line, I should say, in the run game, I think they've been very mid. They haven't been great. They haven't been terrible. I just think they've been average. In the passing game is where I think their strength lies. Obviously, the loss of Anthony Donka is doesn't help matters here. Um, but I really think in this game, what's going to happen is I really think that Penn State's going to have to. They're going to use what they can do, and that is all season long. They've been using those big long drives and short yard situation. I mean, it's almost, and they use the passing game with that, with the short ends to Warren, where it's 3, 4, 5 yards at a clip, and run the clock, shorten the game, because you want to keep that Oregon offense on the bench. You don't want them on the field because they can strike and score from anywhere at any time. I think the game plan here is going to be to slow it down, wear that defense down, hopefully by the fourth quarter, and just play, what we refer to in baseball is play small ball. And that works to Penn State's favor. And I don't know, Jarrod. I still have Penn State coming up on the short end of this. That's not me being, pessimistic or anything. I just think that Oregon is just a little bit better, but opportunistic. You got to take advantage of the mistakes if Oregon makes them. Dylan Gabriel's been known to throw interceptions at bad times in the red zone, but we can't have a repeat of what we watched against Maryland. You fumble in the first play of the game. The very first play from that, they got man cover one. Zakee Wheatley is terribly late getting to the coverage on that one side of the field. There's no safety help there. So you had 2 plays and Penn State's already down 7-0. You can do that against Maryland. You don't want to do that against Oregon.
100%. And I think that's the biggest thing too is you got to come out and play a near flawless game. You don't have to play perfect, but you can't have your mistakes hurt you. Those types of things can work against Maryland, against Bowling Green or whoever, but not against Oregon, the number 1 team in the country. Looking at Oregon's schedule, they're not a team that likes to start out fast. They don't get on the scoreboard very early. Usually it's a 1 touchdown game in the first quarter. But for Penn State, you just got to weather that early storm. Their defense in the second half has been pretty lights out no matter who they played. But for Penn State to win, they've got to establish the run early, and they got to let Drew Aller cook. And whether that's to Warren or whoever, Luke Reynolds even, there's that. I really like the matchup of Abdul Carter against Oregon right now. He's playing some really good football, and I think he's a candidate that could be in New York for the Heisman. He's that good. I mean, he's the first player to win the Defensive Player of the Year for Penn State since Carl Nassib in 2015. First player with double-digit sacks since then as well. So for Penn State, they got to play a near flawless game, but it's a really weird predicament for both teams because a win is great, but a loss is okay too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then this is the beauty of being where they're at. Where, hey, all right, we lost to Ohio State. Let's buckle up. Let's move forward. Take each game 1 game at a time. That's the beauty of the 12-game playoff. The irony of this whole thing, Jarrod, is, as we have seen in the past, and as you know, like the year that they did win the Big Ten championship, they ended up 5th in the college football playoff. They made it to the Big Ten championship, did not go to the playoffs because Ohio State beat them during the regular season. And so now, the very first year of the college football playoff, and there sits Penn State at number 3, where we could have ourselves a good old Texas-Penn State national semifinal. Who would have thought? The very first year that the 12 team gets expanded, the Penn State's actually finishing in the top 4.
It's very, very James Franklin. We're going to talk a little bit more about the other teams in the playoff when we come back for this break on the Behind the Curtain podcast on the Nittany Sports Now Network. Welcome back to the third and final segment of the Behind the Curtain podcast and the Sports Now Network. He's the mayor, and I am just along in a city, hours away, but virtually we are together. Speaking of together, games start Friday night for conference championships. Now, of course, this is the month of December is awesome as far as football goes because you get now the conference championships usually in the first weekend. Then you get the Army-Navy game the second, and the Heisman ceremony, which I think Tyler Warren should get an invite. I don't know that he's going to win, but I do think that he should get an invite to New York. Same with Abdul Carter. He could also get one as well. But, then you get the first round of the playoff. Then you get the quarterfinal. Then you get the semifinals. And then you're in January, and then it's hockey season.
We don't have a hockey team.
Well, yeah, not anymore. Oh, sorry, the Utah Hockey Club.
Oh, there you go.
But for Penn State, they have a really good setup. They play Saturday night at 8:17 p.m. is when kickoff is scheduled. It's on CBS. Thank God. I don't get to listen to a lot of games, which is great. And I don't claim to know the everything about doing the radio as a color commentator for football, but man, sometimes guys are just so goddamn insufferable on the radio or on the TV, and it is just awful. You experienced it in the Georgia Tech game. I know the seniors have never lost there. I get it. I heard it the first 25 times. I get that you haven't had anything to talk about since the third quarter, but damn, I know this. I know that Kirby Smart loves to call a timeout. God, yes, I know. And I know that Georgia Tech's quarterback is scrappy as hell. Absolutely. And I know that the SEC is beloved by everybody at the mothership.
But Jarrod, did you know that Penn State went 9 overtimes? Did they even discuss that? How many times do we hear that? Huh? During the discussion about the 9 overtime game.
That game set football back 35 years. But football gets started with a couple of mid-major games. You've got my beloved Boise State Broncos facing UNLV at 8 o'clock on Friday night on Fox. A win in Boise State is guaranteed a bye in the first round because they are the highest ranked Group of 5 team, and they're the fourth highest ranked conference champion, which is absurd because the Big 12 has not been good this year. Now, if you ask certain EDs about how they feel about the ACC, about the win games, that's all. Just win your games. So what are your thoughts on UNLV and Boise State?
I think I'm still going to go with Boise State in this one. I'm going to go Boise State 38-30. The interesting fact with UNLV is their starting quarterback at the beginning of the season bailed after the first 3 games because UNLV didn't hold up the end of their contract. So he left the team, and now here's UNLV with a chance to win their conference. And
they played better without him.
Yeah, they have. They really have. So I'm going Boise State 38-30. What about you? I should even ask you this.
Yeah, obviously I have Boise State winning, and I think it's going to be about 34-27.
Okay.
Army Tulane. I'm a week ahead of myself. Army Navy. Army Tulane. That game is at Michie Stadium in West Point.
I'm going Tulane. I'm going Tulane in this one.
Yeah, I think Army's fake. They're fake 10-1, which is really weird to say, but they haven't played anybody. When they did play somebody, they got their doors blown in by the Catholics.
Yep.
I know you have something to say about that, so we're going to hold off on anything and how you feel. Big 12 championship game in Jerry World. Sun won't be a factor because that game's at noon, so the curtains will be fine. Iowa State, Arizona State.
If you would have asked me 2 weeks ago, I'd tell you Iowa State. Arizona State has, I don't know, maybe this is the homer coming in at me, or maybe this is just to keep myself from getting yelled at by all my friends here that are ASU fans. So I'm going to go Arizona State in this one. I think Scatterboo is going to lead these guys. Levitt's been playing well. I'm going to go with ASU in the upset here.
Yeah, I think Arizona State's going to win as well, and it pains me because I don't like one of their vice presidents. I think he's a complete douchebag, and Dr. Chris Howard. But that's a story for another podcast. Georgia and Texas in the SEC championship.
Did you just say Chris Howard?
Yeah.
From Robert Morris?
Oh yeah.
I did not know that. Interesting. Another topic for another day, but very interesting. I did not know that. Wow.
Yeah.
Or I did and I forgot. I'm kind of old, Jarrod.
Well, yes, that is true. Some of us had birthdays last week. Others had birthdays this week.
So what do you got?
Georgia and Texas in the battle of the SEC.
I'm going with Texas here. I'm going to go Texas 40. I'm going to go Texas 44, Georgia 34. Georgia's defense sucks.
Hold on. This just in. Kirby Smart has called yet another timeout.
Hey.
I got Texas as well.
Well, I have to go with Texas too because that game is not at home. And did you know that Georgia is undefeated the last 4 years at home? These kids have not lost a home game. Yeah. I don't know if you knew that, Jarrod, but I wanted to make sure you knew that.
It had been a while, almost a week since I had heard that.
All right.
ACC, Clemson and SMU.
I'm going SMU.
I am too, but this is the most chaotic situation because it's really going to test what they do to a team that loses. If SMU were to lose and Clemson were to win, you have a 3-loss Clemson team, which is funny in itself, being a conference champion. But what do they do with an 11-2 SMU team that's ranked number 8? You know, Clemson might not even get the first round bye in that case.
I still think if SMU loses this game and they don't get their absolute doors blown in, which I don't think they will, you still have to put them in.
Right. It would be hilarious if Clemson would then be the 12 seed, which sets up for the 5 seed of being Penn State.
Yeah. And then we can all gang up on Benny Weiland. Benny, I know you're out there somewhere, buddy. The whole Weiland family are Clemson fans. So shout out to Mike and Sue, Weiland, and Benny.
I do like Clemson, I do like SMU over Clemson, but from a pure chaos standpoint, man, that would be wild if Clemson can pull it off. I don't think that they can.
We're all about chaos here, buddy.
That's right. Speaking of chaos, Penn State, Oregon. You said you got Oregon. I've got Penn State.
I've got Oregon by 2.
I got Penn State by 4.
And the only reason I say by 2 is because the left side of that kicking game, left side, fails again 3 weeks in a row. And Ryan Barker gets his ball tipped, and Penn State loses a heartbreaker with 3 seconds left in the game, 26-24.
Oh, man. You've had nightmares about this one before. I have them winning 24-20. The logistics of Oregon getting there, this is a game that it doesn't pay you to lose, but it could be very beneficial if you lose as well, which is a very weird predicament to be in. I think it's going to be an interesting game, but I think they match up pretty well. It'll be very interesting to see what goes on in the field at Lucas Oil Stadium. This is not Penn State's first rodeo there, while it is definitely Oregon's biggest one and the longest trip that they've had to take for a conference championship game as well.
Yep. It's going to be a good game.
And then we all save up for the Fiesta Bowl.
I like
that. Would be most likely the spot that Penn State would land if they're number 5. They would get if they win their first round playoff game, they'll probably get Boise State Fiesta Bowl, which would be tricky.
I mean, I guess that would be okay. Well,
I'm sure you'd be all right with having another game in your backyard.
Oh yeah, I got an extra room here.
Yeah, I don't know if I can afford the flight to get there. I may be hitchhiking. It's a long drive.
You and Junior need to come out.
Yeah, let's carpool. All right. We've reached the end of the show. Here's your curtain call.
Here's my curtain call. Wow, I actually wasn't even thinking about this, but I have one that I'm gonna reference a Seinfeld quote, and then I'll tell you who I'm directing it to. And that Jerry Seinfeld says, "Hey, would you do me a favor? Would you shut up?" Yes, Lane Kiffin, I'm talking to you. You go on, you put up tweet after tweet after tweet defending your position. Who did you play? Who did the other team play? Here's how many points we scored. Here's the differential. Could you do me a favor? Just shut up. That's my curtain call.
Gotta love it. Chaos is all around us. Should be a fun game. We'll talk again next week about it. For the mayor, this has been Jarrod Prugar on the Behind the Curtain podcast on the Nittany Sports Now Network. We'll catch you again next week.